Hey, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to spend a few moments with me here on SML TV. Welcome wherever you're watching me from, the islands of the sea, Harare, Zimbabwe, Bogota, Colombia, the Seychelles, Kwakasomokutwapia, Kundola, Western Province, Northern Province, Perth, Australia, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Plaquemine, Denham Springs, Bossier City, wherever, New Orleans. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being with me for a few minutes. Guys, let's talk about this because I honestly believe that Al Jazeera, and you can see the scrolling there, Al Jazeera has opened a Pandora's box that is going to be instrumental in potentially changing the direction of Zimbabwe. Let's just let that sink in. Let that sizzle in your spirit. Now, let's be clear. Everything that Al Jazeera has brought to the fore is not new to the Zimbabwean people. Everything that Al Jazeera has alleged is not a new phenomenon. The people of Zimbabwe have known about this for years. You've got decorated journalists, Zimbabwean journalists, who have been muzzled, who've been victimized, who've been harangued because they have sounded the alarm on Zimbabwe's tragic trajectory. Journalists, recognized journalists like Hopewell. Is it Hopewell? Hopewell Chinono. I hope I said that name correctly. People like him and many like him have sounded the alarm for a very long time. I was watching Hopewell on Al Jazeera, and he was narrating how his personal property had been seized by the ZANU-PF because he's been talking about these things and sounding the alarm. You've got the president's niece, the niece of President Mnangagwa, Emerson Mnangagwa, who's at the forefront of embezzlement, siphoning, smuggling. And these are the people that are in charge, that are holding the reins of a country. And for the first time in a long time, we have an independent, outside source of accurate news that is ringing the bell, and it is so loud, you should not, you must not, you cannot afford to ignore it. Many of you know, I'll throw it up here. I'll throw it up here because I think it's very important. One of the things that has come out is that this Uebert Angel, and incidentally, his full name is Uebert Mudzanire Angel, because these false prophets, they love to do that. They love to take names that they attach to themselves, names that do not belong to them. Angel is not an African name. Angel doesn't have a tribal lineage. As many of you know, in Africa, our names mean something. My name, Mwewa, my surname, Mwewa, just from my surname, you can tell which region of the country I'm from. And that's why here in Africa, in particular, it's very important to know your name. One of the first things people ask you is your name. Where are you from? Because your name tells me where you're from. So you've got these charlatans that they just pick names, and they're all the same. Whether it's Bushiri, his name is not Shepherd Bushiri. His name is Chipiliro Gama, this crook from Malawi. They all do it. They all have these aliases that they throw around. and they do it to hoodwink their followers. So this Uebert Mudzanire Angel has responded apparently to the Al Jazeera documentary. And this is what he said. He said, I knew I was being recorded. Pure lies. Not only is Uebert Angel a false prophet, there is not one iota of spirituality that's attached to Uebert Angel. He has no spiritual integrity. He does not have a spiritual bone in his body. Everything that he stands for is carnal. It's about self-aggrandizement. It's about reaping where he hasn't sown. It's about raping the Zimbabwean economy. That's all it is. It's about being a saboteur. And here it is. He says, I knew I was being recorded. Complete lies. And let me tell you why these guys think that they can get away with statements like this. It's because of this here. They use the cult of personality to deceive the ignorant masses. Are you familiar with this phrase? The cult of personality. It's rife within the church. This idea that the papa or the prophet cannot be questioned, cannot be challenged. You remember years ago in America, and there've been many, but I'm just going to cite one. There was Jim Jones. There was David Koresh, the young man over there in Waco, Texas, that mobilized a whole group of people that he had placed under his spell of personality, where they believed everything that he said. You couldn't question David Koresh. David Koresh, who would literally walk up to you as a married man and tell you that God has told him to sleep with your wife, to have sex with your wife. And because you are under this burden, you are under this shadow, you have subjected yourself to the cult of personality. You submit. This Uebert Angel does the same thing. You know, these false prophets, they swap wives. Uebert Angel's wife sleeps with Bushiri. Bushiri's wife sleeps with Uebert Angel. Uebert Angel looks at a woman in his church and says, you know, God's told me to be with you, and he has sex with. They do it's a mess, is what it is. It is a cult. And these so-called prophets use the cult of personality to deceive the masses. The idea that you cannot question a papa. I was listening the other day, and they all use this as a gimmick. Anytime you hear a man say, don't speak against the men of God, that's a red flag. Why can't you speak against them? When they're doing wrong, you speak against them. And they use the scripture. They use the scripture, touch not the Lord's anointed. A scripture that has been misinterpreted for many, many years and misused and abused. Well, when you see wrong, you judge it. You say that that's wrong. If you see a man that calls himself a man of God, he walks up to your wife and says, God's told me to have sex with your wife. Are you going to stand there and say, oh, touch not the Lord's anointed? Nonsense, ridiculous, hogwash, bull roar. That's what that is. It's bull roar. Are you hearing that? And for those of you, and there are many of you, for those of you that have allowed yourselves to be cast under the spell of the cult of personality, I wish you liberation. I wish you freedom. Move and step out of the pavilion. Step out of that umbrella of deception. Remove the scales from your eyes and begin to live your life. Don't subject yourself to the cult of personality. And here it is, this Uebert Angel has told his followers, oh, I knew these guys from Al Jazeera were recording me. I sussed them out the moment they walked in. I was 5 steps ahead of them. They didn't know what was going on, but I knew what was happening. Pure lies. Not only is Uebert Angel a false prophet, he's a pathological liar. He's a pathological, shameless liar, and he does it while holding the Bible. Oh man, I tell you what, remember that scripture? I'm going to throw it up here. I'm going to throw this scripture up, boy. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. And this scripture perfectly describes people like Uebert Mudzanire, Angel, perfectly describes Shepherd Bushiri, Chipiliro Gama, perfectly describes that Suleiman, that false prophet over there in Nigeria, perfectly describes Joshua Iginlau, perfectly describes them. Having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. And so here it is, guys. Here it is. You've got a man that is using his diplomatic position for criminal activities. Somebody please tell me that they can't get away with this. Are you telling me that even after this revelation, of course, President Emerson Mnangagwa over there in Zimbabwe, who was cut from the same cloth as the late Robert Mugabe, Mugabe who cared nothing about Zimbabwe, Mugabe who clouded and shrouded his message under the pavilion of empowering the average Zimbabwean, when really it was all a gimmick. It was all an effort to hold on to power for as long as he could, and he held on to power almost to the end of his life. So here it is, you've got this Emerson Mnangagwa, who's basically the same person. Emerson Mnangagwa is Robert Mugabe incarnate. There, let's put it out there. Let me say it again because I think that's important. Let me say it again because I think it bears repeating. This new president of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, is the incarnate of the late Robert Mugabe. Zimbabwe has done nothing but rearrange the chairs on the Titanic. It doesn't matter where you put the chairs. That ship will still sink. And so there is only one answer for Zimbabwe, and it's going to happen. It has to happen this year in July. The people of Zimbabwe have to stand up for that nation. Do not crumble under the shadow of these vagabonds. Do not be sheepish under the shadow of these crooks, these bottom feeders, these gangsters. Raise your voice, Zimbabwe. Your time is now. Get rid of anything that has PF in it. Pathetic fools. Get rid of anything that has PF in it. Pathological fools. And usher in a new government that will steer you in the right direction. Right now, what you have, Zimbabwe, is that you have a clique of people, a handful of Zimbabweans who think it's their God-given right to plunder and to steal from your nation at the expense of the people of Zimbabwe. It's time to flip the script, Zimbabwe. It's time to wake up out of your slumber, Zimbabwe. You've been oppressed too long. You've been downgraded too long. You have been plundered too long. Oh, but there comes a time. There's no way you can believe that narrative that there's nothing you can do. Don't believe the naysayers that tell you that you are nothing and you are less than and you are has-beens. Stand up. Zimbabwe, stand up. And what needs to happen now is that the international community needs to strip this farce of a government. Strip them. Cut them down like the crooks they are. That Uebert Angel must be removed. That Emerson Mnangagwa has to be removed. Usher in a brand new dispensation for Zimbabwe. Now, granted, it's not going to be easy because I tell you, you guys have been messed up for so long, you don't even know what right is, even if it's stared at you. Let me say that again. You guys have been messed up for so long. It's like a child that's been raised in an abusive home for many, many years. From the child at the time was a toddler, and you abuse that child all the way into its teens. And then all of a sudden you tell that child it's time for a change. It's very difficult for that child to realign, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible, Zimbabwe. July 2023, do whatever you can within your power to remove this illegitimate gangster of a government and usher in a semblance of order. A new era for Zimbabwe is on the horizon. We love you, Zimbabwe. Make it right.